Florence Nightingale was a pioneer of her time. Born in 1820, she changed nursing from a secular religious calling to a non-secular professional career. Born to upper-class liberal humanitarian parents, Florence grew up with social reformation as a staple of conversation at the dinner table. Her grandfather was a famed abolitionist, and she was raised with a classical education, studying literature and multiple languages. Florence was active from an early age within her community, offering ministering to the sick and the poor. Her family tolerated this, however, forbade her from pursuing nursing, which was considered an unsuitable profession for a wealthy British woman. Despite her parents' protests, Florence remained convinced that nursing was her calling from God. She rejected marriage proposals and the traditional role of wife and mother, and instead enrolled at age 24 in the Lutheran Hospital of Pastor Fliedner in Kaiserwerth, Germany, as a student of nursing.
Or have you no feeling for me?
I love you dearly, but I cannot marry you, and I have told you why.
In the early 1850s, Florence returned to England to work at the Middlesex Hospital for Ailing Governesses. Within 1 year of being hired, she was promoted to superintendent and was responsible for managing a severe cholera outbreak. Florence instituted hygiene reforms that significantly reduced the death toll and began the foundation of the development of her environmental theory of nursing. During her early travels, Florence met and developed a lifelong friendship with politician Sidney Herbert, who would go on to be Secretary of War during the Crimean War. It was as a result of this friendship that Florence was contacted to organize a corps of nurses to care for the soldiers. Prior to Florence, female nurses had suffered from a terrible reputation and were not being utilized in the war efforts. Florence took a group of 34 nurses to the British base hospital in Constantinople. The conditions that she found were abysmal. More soldiers were dying of infectious disease than injuries, with cholera and typhoid fever running rampant. Because of her experience battling cholera outbreaks in England, Florence was uniquely situated to the task at hand. She quickly set about restoring order to the fetid conditions, tackling the halls with scrub brushes and soap. Not only did she earn the nickname the Lady with the Lamp for her ceaseless walking of halls, but she reduced the death rate by 2/3. It was during this time that Florence began to develop her environmental theory. In addition to cleaning the hospital and maintaining a standard of cleanliness for the patients, she started an invalid kitchen dedicated to preparing nutritious, appealing foods to accommodate special dietary needs. She established a laundry as well as a library and classroom. Florence diligently recorded her observations of the effects related to her changes at this hospital, and after the war wrote an 830-page report detailing this. Her notes on matters affecting the health, efficiency, and hospital administration of the British Army became the foundation for restructuring British military hospitals worldwide. Florence defined her environmental theory as the act of utilizing the environment of the patient to assist him in his recovery. She identified 5 environmental factors: fresh air, pure water, efficient drainage, cleanliness or sanitation, and light or direct sunlight. This was based on 7 assumptions: natural laws, mankind can achieve perfection, nursing is a calling, nursing is an art and science, nursing is achieved through environmental alteration, nursing requires a specific educational base, and nursing is distinct and separate from medicine. The framework of environmental theory is contained within the Nightingale's canons. These 13 major concepts are ventilation and warming, health of houses, petty management, noise, variety, taking of food, what food, bed and bedding, light, cleanliness of rooms and walls, personal cleanliness, chattering hopes and advice, observation of the patient. Nursing, per Nightingale, was a distinct and separate caring profession based on a spiritual calling. The role of the nurse was to perform patient-centered care that would assist the patient to a return of homeostasis. The disease process was considered an absence of comfort, as opposed to a distinct independent pathology. In this way, environmental theory is both a philosophy and a framework for healing. The first canon of nursing, Nightingale considered to be the most important. The air surrounding a patient must be without a chill and be fresh and pure. This canon can be examined within the Victorian context of miasmas, or fetid stench, being cause of disease. While on the surface, current medical knowledge does not attribute ill health to bad smells, we do utilize isolation precautions based on certain diseases. It is interesting to note that despite the lack of understanding of microbiology, Nightingale was able to observe diseases in which we would utilize a droplet and respiratory precautions to prevent the spread of, such as tuberculosis, influenza, pertussis, and diphtheria. Health of houses refers back to the construction of buildings to best reflect the 5 environmental factors: pure fresh air, pure water, efficient drainage, cleanliness, and light. Nightingale spends a great deal of time emphasizing proper home construction and utilization of appropriate sanitation. She was a scourge for cleaning. She traced a large part of infection as being related to ineffective and inappropriate sanitation and hygiene. The majority of nursing was done in the home. As a result of this, Nightingale focused on the home environment and educating women of the house to be nurses. She sought to educate nurses on being in charge of the house and sick environment. Ultimate responsibility lay with you, but you should know how to delegate through effective leadership. This was described as petty management. She detailed examples of effective and ineffective management and how it impacted patient health and wellness. She details being in charge, and in effect outlines the very first charge nurse role in history. It is interesting that she emphasizes appropriate delegation and cautions against the role of being too prideful. It is better to implement a system and educate others on carrying out the system rather than being the savior of the house. Nightingale goes into great length discussing the role that excessive noise plays with the health and healing of patients. She discusses its impact on sleep as well as anxiety levels of patients. Her observations are particularly keen, as her descriptions of the types of noises and sleep disruptions that are most detrimental to patients is consistent with modern research into noise and delirium in the ICU. She even goes on to discuss the benefits of music and the type of music for healing, despite it being not cost-effective at the time. Nightingale discusses variety as a means for recovery. She emphasizes the mind-body connection and how both influence each other. She discusses the importance of varied views and locations and how a depressed and altered mental state will restrict physical healing. She refers to her own experiences as a patient. One could venture to state that due to her own illnesses, Nightingale had an even clearer, compassionate concept of what the patient experience was. Nightingale stresses the importance of a patient-centered approach to nutrition, that is, working with the patient to ascertain what they can and will eat. She stresses the importance of the quality of the food and the need to have uninterrupted meal times. She states to take away uneaten food and keep trying to feed the patient, always looking for creative solutions, but to be careful not to overwhelm the patient with food that is too rich or too much. Again, Nightingale stresses patient-centered care. At this time, much was made of chemistry and analyzing the content of food to try and break them down into prescriptions for health. Nightingale instead offers common-sense advice to let the patient dictate that which they can eat. She stresses finding nutritious options in small, concentrated amounts rather than simply adding bulk to food. She cautions against taxing the digestive system and instead states that the patient will crave that which they need for healing. The additional benefit being that the patient will be more inclined to consume something they actually like and want, rather than what we think is good for them. It is interesting to note that modern research supports this, as studies have shown food cravings linked to mineral deficiencies. According to Nightingale, dampness was a scourge to be avoided at all costs. The ideal situation for a bedbound patient was 2 iron beds, completely made up, narrow enough to reach the patient at all sides, and the patient should switch beds completely every 12 hours in order to air out the other completely. When this was not feasible, it was important to ensure no damp cloths were ever left under the patient. She specifically states, "It may be worthwhile to remark that while there is any danger of bed sores, a blanket should never be placed under the patient. It retains damp and acts like a poultice." This is completely consistent with current nursing practice to this day. The less linens under the patient, the better for skin integrity. While she makes frequent references to effluvia and emanations, what we now know through modern science, she is most likely witnessing viral, fungal, and bacterial contaminants. Nightingale's observations, while not proven by microbiology, were nevertheless accurate in her findings. While Nightingale acknowledges that there are some cases where direct sunlight can be harmful, such as in rare eye diseases, overall, direct sunlight and a view of the outside are paramount to recovery. She stresses the importance of getting patients outside whenever possible, and when it is not, making sure the sick room is not closed off and dark. Evidence-based practice today supports this, from vitamin D deficiencies to phototherapy to circadian rhythm and delirium. Sunlight is known to have beneficial effects for most patients. Nightingale abhorred carpet, calling it the worst expedient which could by any possibility have been invented. She states, "A dirty carpet literally infects the room." Nightingale preached against porous, absorbent materials, instead stating that the best walls were made of cement, glass, or well-made glazed tiles. She links ventilation with cleanliness, stating that one cannot be without the other, and just flapping dust from one room to the other will not provide cleanliness. What was absolutely revolutionary about her was her observations that organic matter contaminates everything, that cleaning only works with the correct products on the correct surfaces, and the lack of this leads to sickness or prolonged illness in the already sick individual. To this day, we subscribe to these same systems for cleaning and disinfecting our hospitals and environments. She observed and knew all of this before the discovery of bacteria. Nightingale stressed both cleanliness of patients and frequent hand washing of staff. She outlined that the skin and the condition of the skin was one of the best indicators of patient health. This is mirrored in current nursing practice, as the skin is the largest organ of the human body. She also goes into great detail discussing how to wash your hands, discussing the role friction and soap play, almost to the point that you could imagine you were in a current infectious disease lecture. She does not lecture on how to wash patients, instead deferring to individual needs based on physicians' orders. However, she does stress that care is made to ensure adequate cleanliness, minimal exposure to the elements while bathing, and thorough drying. Nightingale directs nurses to control visitors in the sick room, observing that patients do better for honest, open dialogue than chattering hopes and advices. By continuing to deny the reality of the situation in order to cheer the patient, you do more harm and exhaustion and leave the patient feeling isolated and alone. She advises to bring babies and children in to visit, observing that they will adjust to what the patient needs far quicker than adults. And if you worry about the ill environment for the baby, then make it better for both patient and baby. She stresses that making light of the illness or giving false hope of recovery do more harm than good, and to allow the patient to express their wishes and directions openly and honestly without having to worry about bothering family and friends. In her footnote, she even points to the benefit of a small pet, and if the patient can care for it themselves, then even better. In this regard, she points to her own experiences as a patient, once again highlighting an astute, patient-centered, compassionate care approach to nursing. Even among intensive care units, we are moving towards more open, honest communications, open visiting hours, and allowing children to visit in some cases when appropriate. Therapy pets, activities, and visitors all serve as part of the healing process. Nightingale believes the most important practical lesson that can be given to nurses is to teach them what to observe and how to observe. She goes on to state that this should be the essential part of nurse education and training. What does she mean by this? What she is really discussing is critical thinking skills as the foundation of nursing practice. Nurses serve in a unique role, the one at the bedside for the most amount of time, capable of intense observation of the patient, treatments, and effective care. She goes on to stress how to observe, how to record observations, and how to be factual in your reporting. She is no less than outlining an SBAR report to give to physicians, long before this was ever a concept. She eschews leading questions and stresses accuracy in observation and recording. Nightingale allows for various forms of observation and recording, but states if you cannot accomplish this essential task, you should not be a nurse, no matter how dedicated you might be. Nightingale was an accomplished statistician. However, she did not rely on statistics alone. She states, "Average rate of mortality tells us only that so many % will die. Observation must tell us which in the 100 they will be who will die." This keen recognition of the need to discernment in observation as opposed to strict data collection elevated the role of nursing immeasurably. Her notes on nursing spend more time detailing observation skills, communication, and patient privacy than any other canon. This is the how and why of nursing practice, as she describes it, and takes nursing from a series of tasks to a discerning, compassionate profession. The foundation of environmental theory is the belief that nature alone heals. At the time, great emphasis was placed on dissection of bodies and learning pathology of diseased organs. This was felt to be impossible for women to learn. Nightingale believed that pathology can only teach the harm that has been done, and that the curative process was through observation and experience to teach the positive principles of health and wellness. Her experience in both medical and surgical nursing led her to believe that medicine's role was to remove the obstruction necessary for the body to heal itself. Her emphasis was always on homeostasis, and the nurse's role was to adjust the environment to optimize the healing process. Nightingale had very distinct ideas regarding nursing, the roles of nurses, and the differences between doctors and nurses. At the time, there was much aspersion cast on the role of the nurse, feeling that women were pretending to be amateur doctors. Even then, men were threatened by women overstepping their bounds. Nightingale's response to this was education of nurses as a distinct and different profession from medicine. She felt that through this education, women would be a help and not a hindrance to doctors, thus working in partnership with them to achieve the same goals of health and wellness of the patient. Prior to Nightingale, nursing was taught in religious settings, with nursing sisters taking religious vows. While she felt it was a spiritual calling to be a nurse, she instead advocated and implemented schools of nursing for women of all religious faiths. Nightingale was a feminist in the truest sense of the word, and she ardently advocated for the education and advancement of women. During the Crimean War, the implementation of environmental theory saw a 2/3 reduction in the death count at the British base hospital. Her writings on her experiences went on to form the Royal Sanitary Commission, prompting health reforms across the British Empire. Upon her return to England, she was lauded a hero and awarded a large monetary commission from Queen Victoria. She established in 1860 the redesigned St. Thomas Hospital and Nightingale's training school for nurses based on her environmental theory. She became a prolific author, and her notes on hospitals prompted the U.S. government to contact her for advice on sanitation reforms during the Civil War. Nightingale was an accomplished mathematician. She was inducted as the first female member of the Royal Statistical Society in 1859 and became an honorary member of the American Statistical Society in 1874. This was based on her publication of her Rose diagram, which was a statistical analysis of the causes of mortality during the Crimean War. While the influence of Nightingale and her environmental theory is undisputed, what role, if any, does it play in current nursing practice? How does one take a theory that predates modern medicine and science and make it applicable in today's high-technology-driven world? The core of environmental theory is patient-centered care. This is consistent and reflective of all modern nursing theories and forms the basis for nursing care across all modalities. Environmental theory focuses on infection control, patient assessment and observation, patient self-care, therapeutic communication, and spiritual nursing are all aspects we continue to utilize in current nursing practice. Environmental theory forms the basis for ongoing current nursing research in areas such as noise and ICU delirium, therapeutic communication and healing effect, modalities on death and dying, early nutritional interventions post-surgery, reducing NPO status in patient populations, infection control, and public health advocacy. The use of environmental theory, whether as a primary theory or adjunct, will serve to enhance the nursing practice. Patient-centered care, focused on the health and well-being of the patient, will always have a positive effect. Furthermore, the aspect of therapeutic communication, infection control, noise reduction, and sleep promotion will have a positive impact on patient satisfaction scores. The canon with the most applicability and lasting impact for nurses is observation. Nightingale goes into thorough detail outlining nursing observation, nursing research, and effective communication with the healthcare team. This is taught to this day in nursing school and should be emphasized at every juncture. Nightingale's notes on nursing is easy to read, written in common language that is easily understood even today. Environmental theory is based in common sense, much of which we take for granted. There are many positive applications, and environmental theory has and continues to form the backbone of nursing research. Notes on nursing was primarily written for the home caregiver, with 24/7 primary nursing care as their job. While Nightingale did write recommendations for the wartime hospital, focusing on surgical nursing, her environmental theory was largely written for the home nurse. Her ideal situation allows for one-to-one primary nursing care, which is not realistic in the current hospital setting. Environmental theory presupposes that disease is the absence of comfort and that the body must heal itself. While on a broad level this is true, this theory does predate modern disease process knowledge. The nursing interventions remain largely unchanged. However, some of our understanding has broadened to include such things as antibiotic usage, the timing of medications, obtaining of lab specimens, and the use of interventions such as oxygen and pulmonary toileting fall under nursing care, which is different from Nightingale's times. Some interventions as illustrated are outdated. What is remarkable is how much of this theory, exactly as described to be implemented, remains largely relevant. As discussed before, Nightingale and her theory have made innumerable contributions to nursing. Her prolific publications represent the first published nursing research and the establishment of evidence-based practice. Environmental theory reshaped nursing in hospitals worldwide, and her establishment of nursing training schools became the models for nursing education across the globe. She was the first to establish standards of care in nursing, and she elevated nursing into an acceptable profession for the educated woman. Nightingale's observations and research became the foundation for future nurse researchers to this day. The most prestigious award in nursing that can be achieved, the Florence Nightingale Medal, is given every 2 years by the International Committee of the Red Cross to nurses demonstrating distinction in disaster nursing, public health, or nursing education. The Florence Nightingale Pledge is recited by all graduating nurses worldwide to demonstrate a commitment and pledge to excellence in nursing. From early seminaries through establishment of professional nursing to current evidence-based practice, nursing has always sought to improve itself. Nursing remains a distinct, patient-centered, multifaceted profession. Florence Nightingale and her environmental theory became the foundation for this, inspiring new generations of nurses to continue to provide excellence in care. Environmental theory continues to be the foundation of all nursing interventions. It forms nursing standards of care and a broad framework to describe nursing approach and interventions. What will the future think of Florence Nightingale and her theory? Current research is seeing a resurgence of back-to-basics nursing care. Focus has come back to individualized, patient-centered nursing interventions designed to maximize healing and health promotion. It is my belief that over time, Nightingale and her environmental theory will take on a renewed importance in current nursing practice. Florence Nightingale is the model we can all aspire to, from her education and commitment to excellence. There is a reason she is considered the mother of modern nursing. In studying her and her theory, one cannot help but be in awe of this amazing woman. She is timeless, an icon and a beacon for future generations to follow.